Hi guys. How you doing? Yeah? Any advance on good? I'm Calum. I'm a web developer at a company called With Associates, but I'm also a musician with the instrument you might know as the computer. I usually use Super Collider, but that's not for here. You don't want to know about that. It's dirty. So I want to talk a bit about Web MIDI. So I've got a talk here called Musical Internet Device Instructions, which is not what MIDI stands for, because that would make sense. Because MIDI is something I find interesting. So I've brought along a synthesizer here. We don't have audio going out, but it's going into the synthesizer, into the sound card, and coming back through laptop speakers, just like Emerson, Lake and Palmer really wanted to happen. So I'm interested in MIDI with the web because it opens up a lot of incredible possibilities to my mind that just make art and music interject in this beautiful manner in ways that have often been the domain of like more specialized software, like all your software. So what is MIDI? So MIDI stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. Okay, so MIDI was, still is, it's not dead, a protocol invented in the early 80s that allows computer control of devices, which is, most commonly the synthesizer. And kind of, as time went on, vice versa. So kind of, and it's more common now, a protocol called OSC, Open Source Control. Any advance on that? Eventually computers transmit to MIDI and vice versa. So parts of a simple MIDI message is kind of just sending an instruction to a synthesizer. This kind of comes in three parts. The first there, in this example, a note on, but there's a kind of status bytes, 3 bytes. That's it, that's why it was the 80s, because it's just 3 bytes, it's nothing. So the first one is the status byte, it's called. In this instance, a note on or a note off. Then the note number, which is between 0 and 127. Very, very musical. And then the note velocity, which is again between 0 and 127, but the velocity is essentially the volume. So loads of software, as I mentioned, is capable of using MIDI. It's kind of the foundation of modern music creation, really. There's not, you turn on your radio, there's bound to be a million songs that you would hear in a day that just completely use MIDI. Exclusively almost. Even auto-tune, you can pitch vocals with MIDI these days. It's pretty incredible. So the creation of MIDI has allowed musicians like ourselves to create insane music that's pretty much unplayable, and it's made the creation of that music almost trivial. And that's like probably a good thing, I think, maybe. So computers are cool. But why would you want MIDI on internet? Well, MIDI has been in the operating system for a very, very long time. Pretty much as long as there's been operating systems. Please don't fact check that, because I just said it and made it up. But so everybody's had MIDI in the OS for so long. So why would we want MIDI in the browser? Well, it just kind of, as I've said immediately at the start, and probably should have left till now, instead of just being the domain of this kind of esoteric OS stuff, it being in the browser is such a cool thing, because that just kind of legitimizes it for so many people that wouldn't otherwise get the chance. And it means you don't need Ableton Live, you don't need Reaper, and those are just the cheap ones. You don't need Logic, you don't need any of that stuff. You can just do it in JavaScript, which is a language anyone can learn. So with MIDI in the browser, instead of just playing those MIDI files through the OS, now we've got this way of literally telling that to go away and just doing it straight through the browser. But also, Web MIDI can accept MIDI information, so there's like output and input. So you've got all these young people with their DJing and all that. They've got these beautiful USB. I'm older than I look. And so you have these USB controllers. These people that DJ with their computers and stuff. These young ones with the dungarees. So the possibilities of that is insane. You can create these beautiful experiences in the browser with the USB controllers. I mean, everybody's got one now. I've got one. But I'm being a bit ancient. I'm 29. I'm interested in synths from around the time I was born. So I kind of focused more on sending MIDI to outboard synths because that just blows my mind a little bit, this collusion of the internet and the browser with something as shit and cheap as a 1980s FM rack synth. Just seems insane to me. So browser support for MIDI. Sorry?
What have you got?
I've got a TX81Z, a Yamaha FM synth. I see some guy nodding. Any advance on nodding? A thumbs up, thanks Chris. Moral support. So browser support for the Web MIDI API. Luckily today, Soli was saying, Firefox is going to be supporting natively in /2. So that's awesome. Chrome currently supports it, not even Canary, but behind a flag, which is, you know, Chrome ://flags. You might be aware of that. Sorry, this is my first ever talk. So it's going all right. Get a quick straw poll. No, I'm joking. That was a really dick move. So now we've got Firefox and Chrome in the next couple of ones, and Safari as well. So, but if you are wanting kind of universal acceptance of the Web MIDI API, our Lord and Saviour, Chris Wilson, has handily written a Polyfill for the meantime that works just as well as native, which is great. So to do MIDI, and do is a technical term, you will need an interface. I've got one here, but they come in all shapes and sizes. You can get ones that are literally just USB cables that plug a MIDI cable straight into. And there's just loads of them. They're on Amazon, $2.50 for the cheapest wire. But yeah, so the first thing to do with the Web MIDI Inter API is to find your interface, which is actually kind of the trickiest bit. So to get started, you actually have to request MIDI access with the method here, request MIDI access. It does what it says on the tin. And you do that very politely, and that returns a promise, which returns the object MIDI access, which you will do all your incredible cool work with. So that MIDI access object, and trust me, it gets a bit better after this, holds a list of available outputs as an iterator object, which you can look through as it shows up there. So this example is taken from the API working draft, so it's all there. Chris Wilson's basically done the work for us. We don't need to worry so much. So you can loop through all the available devices. Usually on a Mac, there's a kind of built-in Apple one, which is cool, and then the outboard one. So it's like usually the second one. So once you've got that, you can hold that, the ID of that interface. And the ID is a weird thing. I can't quite make heads or tails of it. I don't know where it comes from, if it's from the device itself, or if it's just an arbitrary number. But I've turned it off and on again, and it's still the same number, so that's pretty cool. But beyond that, I've literally got no idea where it comes from. So that's cool. So maybe make a note of it, write it down, put it in your pocket, on the fridge, who cares? Just please make a note of it, because it took me about 4 hours to figure it out the second time. But once you've got the synth, that's cool, and you can start sending stuff with the method send, which is a very, obvious paradigm to have. So you can start sending it note-on messages. So this is what a typical note-on message looks like. It's, as I mentioned before, a MIDI message, so it's 3 bytes. So a MIDI message is in JavaScript and many other languages, if you want to get mental, is an array of 3 8-bit unsigned integers. Okay? We all following? So there are probably people in this room that can tell you what unsigned integers, maybe 8-bit ones, are probably better than I can. But that's cool. So these are this array represents just basically raw binary data. It just sends just raw data to the MIDI device. So the first byte there is, as mentioned before, these are just the same as what any other device sends. So that's just the message type. The 0x90 is the note on, and the 0x80 is the note off. And then the second one, just out of nowhere, just an integer rather than a hexadecimal, just to really mess with you a little bit. So it's between 0 and 127. 60 is middle C. And then the last one is the velocity, which is same again between 0 and 127. And this 0x7f represents 127, so that's as loud as it gets. I don't muck about. And then the note off. So the note off message is much the same. So if you instantiate a note, that's just going to go on forever unless you send it the note off message on that same note. So this is exactly the same as the last one, but with the status byte being the note off message. Now these messages can actually be scheduled really easily, as is shown up there. And it's just send a second argument to the send method, which uses this window.performance.now method, which just scales the time from when it's instantiated to, in this case, 1,000 milliseconds. So a lot of computer music works in milliseconds rather than tempo like normal people do. Us programmers are pretty cool. So that's basically my little small tiny tutorial, maybe enough to keep you going. But if you've got phones, do you have the internet phones? You know, the Apple internet phones? I'd like to invite you to join me in a little quest here. So I don't know if I mentioned my name's Calum Gunn. The .com is just internet. So part of what I like about the internet is that we can do crazy stuff with it. Like, I'm going to just move some stuff around and try and figure this one out. There we go. And then I'll just load up my browser for the master thing. So this is kind of the first thing that I thought of when I thought about Web MIDI. This idea of transmitting MIDI information through the internet, the internet obviously very 90s technology, through literally 10 of years to a 1980s thing such as this daft synth that I have. Sorry, my website's actually spinning up. It's on Heroku. So, and I wanted, if you go to my calumgunn.com/MIDI, we can all play a little song. You might have to refresh it once it actually loads on here. Just to, here we go. Yeah, so you might feel. That's not me. Let's figure we could try and play a song. So this is just popular JavaScript library Pusher, just setting up a little easy through the internet, a little message sends. All it contains is that note information straight from your phone, goes through here, goes through that, comes back through that, and it's really, really awful, and I do apologise. Just almost to prove it, we just changed the, yeah, that wasn't a pre-recording, yeah, I can tell. So that's it, that's the Web MIDI API in a nutshell, the outward stuff anyway. So if anybody has any questions or solos that they'd like to bust out, then that's cool too. But yeah, sorry it was so short, but MIDI's from the 80s. Thank you. And thank you so much for coming as well. Thanks so much for coming. Get us on Meetup. We've got a Twitter, Web Audio London. We hope to do another one soon. And if you've got any ideas for talks or anything you want to do forever, then just let us know. We've got stickers. But if you've got any questions. It's such a good accompaniment. My friend Magnus there grinning. He knows what he's doing. So thank you very much then, guys. And have a good evening.